Alright, welcome to overanalyzing every single chapter in Land of the Lustrous because I'm crazy and need to talk about the series more. Spoilers for everything in the manga up to 105 because that's what's out right now. And please let me know if you have anything else to add. Comment down below if you analyze anything differently or have a different interpretation, or if you have some wacky ideas like looking at chairs too much in this series. Alright, let's get started. We are in chapter 3. That's right. So here we start off of with Foss looking at their reflection, and again, it's like all distorted, kind of like how it becomes throughout the series. But there's also Jade walking in the background, which So what we can see here is, um, you know, Jade trying to offer help and stuff, and I think this, the last time Jade and Foss speak, Jade says that like they regretted not trying to understand Foss more. You can see here like Jade having a. Is this the first time where Jade is introduced? Right, it isn't, right? Is it? It might be. If this is the first time Jade is introduced, um, you can see that Jade, the very first time Jade is introduced, makes a false assumption about Foss because they don't understand Foss that well, and so that kind of links like back to the last time Jade and Foss see each other, where Jade talks about regretting not understanding Foss that well. Because Jade thinks that Foss is thinking really hard about the project, but instead Foss is wallowing in despair, as they put it. Um, and they ask Jade to help with ideas. Of course, ideas to help Cinnabar, and Jade has no idea, understanding what's going on. Uh, I'll be the main. If anything informs me. Yeah. And so Sensei's asking him to not do anything foolish. Uh, and then we have Rutile testing the hardness of Jade, and this kind of like again reaffirms like how the other gems are more normal because they're good hardness or something, and Rutile's like nah. Another thing is that it kind of gives more insight, like knowing about Podparacha kind of gives more insight of why Rutile does all this stuff. Because by analyzing the other gems and what they're made of, that helps with like them reassembling Podparacha. And so it's kind of crazy how much Podparacha affects Rutile's character before Podparacha is even introduced. Because of course that's the whole reason why Rutile is a doctor to the gems in the first place. Rutile is also, I think, my favorite side character. I say side character if counting Foss and Cinnabar as main characters, because I feel like Foss and Cinnabar are just another level just because they get more screen time and more emotional moments. But I think out of all the side character casts, Rutile is my favorite. Let me know who your favorite side characters in the comments. Um, that's our rock solid Jade. Yep. And of course, Jade is, more of the leader because they're the president of the gems. And then Jade he brings up Diamond as a as someone they can ask. And then they sort of regret it because then they're like, oh no, they're gonna go bother Daya. And here again, like you're right, Daya's gonna be way more helpful than average old Jade. I was asking the wrong person. Thanks. So Foss puts. So again, Jade is more of a president, right? So Jade is more of a strategist along with Euclid. So they do fight, like they have swords and stuff. But again, this is like Foss putting people who fight over people who have other jobs, uh, such as leading the gems or strategizing where they go. And so so Foss is like, oh, you're average. And so it shows like Foss has like a hierarchy of like people in interest, but yet Foss still considers average as over them. And that makes it very interesting for Daya because Foss puts Daya on like the high scale, even though Board is doing most of the fighting in their pairing. Foss really looks up to Daya because Daya is a diamond. Daya is everything Foss lacks, and yet Daya is still envious of Board, which we'll get to. I mean, yeah. Um, Tech power is much cooler than high endurance. Yeah. So you can see that everything is about fighting the boss. The Diamond team is the middle of their afternoon patrol. Yeah, so then Foss goes and meets Diamond, and here's the lovely Daya. Um, I still think like Foss saying that they're too bright and they can't look at them. And with the personality things, like how I said in the beginning, where the gems, uh, the gems gem part of themselves indicates their personality. I feel like that's seen most with Daya and Bort because Daya is very shiny because she's like they're like a diamond, obviously. And that I think that's why Daya is so envious is because diamonds are seen as more of like a thing. But it's so interesting how diamonds are very highly prioritized or wanted in our universe, but because the like brightness of a diamond in this universe isn't that needed, then all Daya really has is their hardness. And of course then there's Bortz, who's more of the industrial type diamond that's used for tools, and they're a lot more they're a lot more, brave, fight wise and stuff like that, and a lot more um like less emotional, And so Dai is kind of like the complete opposite of that. So it's kind of interesting that they're the same hardness class, but have completely different personalities because of their uses and things like that. And so, then Foss appears. Um, it's also very funny how like Daya is so like attached to Foss, in that sort of way. Yet Foss is really weak. Like I remember reading in the lore book. I'm gonna keep bringing that lore book up, but it talks about how diamonds. The reason why diamonds wear long sleeve gloves and long socks is because they can damage other gems of low hardness really easily, even though, and despite that, Daya still tries to be careful when showing affection to Foss. Um, and Foss is asking Daya for ideas because Foss sees Daya as this great person. What if you? Oh no! What if you tried making a big change in yourself? And this is what Daya is trying to do right now. Why Jade said that Daya was experimenting with different techniques, because Daya right now is trying, unlike Cinnabar, like Daya and Foss are the ones who are more wanting to change. And actually, I think all the characters, most of the characters who go with Foss to the moon, um, are okay with change, and most of the characters that stay aren't. Like we see here, like of course that's what the first couple of chapters is building up to is why the reasons why these characters go to the moon. Um, because of course Yellow wants to change something because of how Yellow feels like later. And I find it interesting that the like emotional turmoil of the diamonds is specifically explored, like just like Daya and Yellow Diamond specifically. Um, yeah, maybe trying something you never do. Like again, so these two are pretty dangerous ideals in the concept of the story. Um, and so this is where Foss gets the idea to really try to change. And before, when Foss was getting repaired, and Rutile mentioned that they're never going to be able to find uh, Cinnabar a job, and the fact that people keep telling Foss that they're never going to fight, well, that means that if they can't do it in their current state, they're going to have to change. And they're going to have to try something they'd never do. And that's exactly what Daya is influencing them to do. Um, and Foss says that they're constantly wishing they could change. Uh, and that's a huge theme in the story is the concept of change and staying the same. Um, Very easy idea. And I think like changing is seen as something hard to do, like how it says here. But that's pretty much impossible. This shows that change, like of course change in this universe is something that's really catastrophic. Well, we see it later in the story, but the characters aren't supposed to change, so Foss is trying to look for a solution to not change as much. Do you know how many years I've idled away? And it shows that like the Foss trying to find the easy idea is why they haven't had anything, why they haven't had any progress in the last 300 years. Um, I should have expected this from a hardness 10, nothing but uh, condensation. I can't commune with this god, it's helpless. And if see, this shows how much Foss elevates Daya. And it's really interesting considering how Daya feels about themselves. because Phos elevates Dia with such like to god status. I mean, I bet Phos is being a little sarcastic here, but yeah, and then of course Dia says that they make mistakes too and all that, and forgive them. And Dia is such a like, in contrast to Bort, I think that's why Dia feels a lot more envious towards Bort, because Dia and Bort have such different personalities. Like as you see, like here, Dia is a lot more affectionate, and as we see later when Zircon pairs up with Bort, Bort is like the complete opposite. Um, Thanks, by the way, have you seen Bort? Blah 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 blah. And of course, Phos doesn't like Bort as much, which is understandable for the course of their story. Um, but you're alone. That's weird. Did Bort go off somewhere? Honestly, what a self-censored jerk. We all know that Bort, like, Bort's quiet. Bort thinks more about battle and strategy than, Bort's like a true introvert. And so, like, it makes sense, but in Foss's mind, like, that's callous or something. And I think because of how much Foss elevates Dia, Foss sees these things as more, like, bad things. Um, are you going enabling, and there's a lot of videos on like Bort's and Dia's relationship and how it's like played up as nice in the beginning, but as you learn more about it, you realize how much more toxic it is, and obviously, as it devolves the story, how much it really breaks apart. But yeah, then we have this scene where the Lunarians come, and Dia's like, "I'm gonna fight them," but blah blah blah. This panels, the paneling is so good, just with the Lunarian popping up and like Foss there and all that. Let's look back at like where the position. Again, you have Foss, Dia looking down at Foss, but that's again Foss keeps diving into the ground, so you're gonna keep having things like that. But like, this is something you constantly see of the gems, the other gems always being placed above Foss in the paneling. And like I said in chapter one, this just really emphasizes Foss's views of the other gems being higher than them. Their faces are a lot higher in the frame compared to Foss's. And it shows Foss elevating the other gems and Foss believing that the other gems look down on them. So I'm just gonna keep saying that with how the paneling is genius. So yeah, then we have Dia. Dia does some fighting. Um, and again, like Foss is always so encouraging to Dia. And I believe that Dia has a good relationship with Foss because this is what Dia wants. Just like Foss and just like Cinnabar, Dia wants praise. I mentioned this in the previous chapters, but Dia, the reason why Dia has such a bad, I don't know, like more toxic relationship with Bort is because even though Dia loves how Bort is and how like strong they are and all that, Dia sees them as taking away their praise because I, I guess it's kind of like it kind of is like this because we know that Dia is older than Bort. So it's kind of like Dia feels like Bort stole their show, if that makes sense. Like when a new baby is born into like a family, like that sort of thing. Because like Dia likes having Bort around because they protect Dia and everything like that. But that also means that because Bort is around, uh, all the praise that would have been from Dia is instead given to Bort because Bort is a lot more action oriented and better and more sturdy and all that stuff. Uh, and so that's why Dia wishes for Bort to not be there, because in Dia's mind, if Bort's not there, Dia will get Bort's praise instead. Um, I was going to mention that later, but I went on a rant right now. Um, yeah, and another thing is that uh, I remember someone mentioning the way that Dia has lets the sword break here, kind of like um I don't know. I remember this is over analyzing, but kind of like how they let their arm break later to use as a weapon. Like they are not afraid to get broken in order to defeat the Lunarians, is what I'm saying. Um, which isn't entirely different from which is not entirely different from Foss, who will harm themselves to get a power up, basically. And Dia is the one who kind of instills those thoughts into Foss, so it's kind of very interesting in that way. It's also interesting to see that it's just broken. That's all. Nothing to worry about. Dia saying that, And then, she throws, they throw Foss, and then Bort comes, and Bort's all cool. Um, yeah. So Bort saves them. And so here, isn't it amazing? But Dia doesn't really think this way. This is how it always goes. They're stronger and stronger these days. This shows that Dia really sees Bort as someone constantly improving, and in that way, like changing. That could be why Dia encourages Foss to change. And meanwhile, Dia feels like they're stuck being the same Dia they've always been, and just being in Bort's shadow, basically. Um, so Bort won't let me fight. And see, just like Foss, Dia views fighting as like something honorable and something that brings praise. And so even though Dia sees Bort's fighting prowess as amazing, they they also see it as an obstacle. Um, and then Dia goes on this whole rant, talking about Bort and how they're both diamonds, and that Bort is. It goes on about how Bort is amazing, but this is really a more envious like discussion of it. It kind of like Dia starts out discussing what's the same between Dia and Bort, but then goes off onto how Bort is so much better than Dia. And then Dia says, "I wish I could be like that." And like Foss, the reason why Dia likes Foss so much is because Foss praises Dia and gives Dia confidence, like Bort. And Dia also likes Foss because Foss prefers Dia to Bort. I get the strong part, but gems are scary. You're nice, Dia. You're way better. This also shows that Foss also prefers uh niceness over like fighting ability at this time, and and Dia, considering how Dia gets, Dia becomes less nice. Like when they come back to Earth after the moon, and so Dia sees that niceness as something that is not desired. But Foss, if I'm not as strong, I'm not a diamond. And I guess that's like a difference between Foss and Dia is that Foss doesn't have any expectations to be strong because they're so fragile. But because Dia is like the highest hardness type, Dia feels useless in a similar way to Foss just because Dia can't fulfill those same expectations. Foss's expectations is just to have a role and fit in with society, but Dia feels like they have to fit the mold of being a diamond. Uh, this means Bort is the only real diamond. And so Dia sees it as, and Dia believes that they can never surpass Bort. And because they believe that, they believe the only way that they can be the true diamond or the true person, true, like, highest person worthy of praise is to get rid of Bort. It's true. That's why sometimes, just for a second, I wish I was the only diamond around. Which is kind of funny because Yellow Diamond also exists, but I guess because Dia isn't directly paired up with Bort, Dia really doesn't see Yellow Diamond. I wonder how the story would be different if Dia and Yellow Diamond were teamed up instead. And of course, that's what makes Dia such a interesting character is because Dia gives off such a loving vibe, but in reality, Dia really wants praise and adoration from people, just like Foss, just like Cinnabar, and Dia believes that they can't get that because uh, Bort is in their way. And it's really interesting that Dia can feel similarly to Foss and Bort, even though Dia technically has everything that Cinnabar and Bort. Sorry, did I say Bort? Anyway, I'm saying Dia. It's interesting how Dia can feel the same about as Foss and Cinnabar because Dia has everything that Foss and Cinnabar lacks. Dia has a hardness level, even though they break sometimes. It's not as bad as Foss and Cinnabar. Dia is the highest hardness compared to Foss and Cinnabar, who are the lowest hardness, and yet Dia still feels this way. Dia still feels a lack of praise and wanting to contribute more than they can, and feeling like they're getting sidelined because they can't contribute as much as someone else. And it shows that this enviness that kind of comes. I feel like Foss and Cinnabar aren't as envy of the other characters, but this envy of other characters having a role above uh the characters carries over no matter what hardness they are. Even a diamond who's the highest hardness still feels the same way. So that's what's really interesting. And Daya asks Foss to give it a name because that's Foss's job. And then the sound was Daya, and then we really see like Daya and Bort's relationship here, with Bort being really worried about Daya, but Daya takes Bort's worriness as like criticisms. This is the opposite of praise, which is why Daya like hates Bort at later on. But of course, we see this as it is, as Bort being worried about Daya and wanting Daya to be okay. Like, yeah. But Daya doesn't mind being less safe as long as they are able to get more praise and stuff like that. And see, just how Foss and Cinnabar feel because they don't have a strong purpose. They don't care about being alive in sort of sense. So then it doesn't matter if not if I'm around or not, does it? And so Daya sees Bort's worrying about them as Bort saying that they shouldn't even be fighting or that they shouldn't be here. Because Daya sees it as Bort taking away what gives Daya's life meaning. And so it's very interesting how those characters connect. And I feel like that's why Foss comes to Daya's defenses so quickly, because Foss puts Daya on a pedestal, and because uh, Foss and Daya have similar. Uh, it's interesting because they're so different, but Foss and Daya have things they can bond over in the sense of like wanting to change and wanting to uh, have a greater purpose and not being able to get there, and having an obstacle in front of there. Don't be mean to Daya or brace my wrath. And you see that Daya is trying to protect Foss. Um, Maybe you can help. And Bort saying that if they help Foss and Foss will come back often and often kind of just shows how um, people see Foss as more of a nuisance. Like, um, they think even if they try to help Foss, that they won't ever improve from that. They think that if they lend help to Foss, they'll need to keep giving help to Foss, and they see that as a nuisance. And that kind of just reflects badly on Foss more than the other characters, but it's kind of like a bad thing about both of them because Foss is unable to, even if they can, they're unable to improve themselves as well. And that reflects badly on their reputation, which makes characters less inclined to help them because they don't want to stretch out their like helpfulness too much. Like Bort says that very adamantly, but I bet other characters in the series feel that same way too. Um, yeah, and that's when the Lunarians show up, and it says that it's going there, and Sensei's taking a nap and all that. And again with the paneling, let's look at this again. Again, Foss keeps dropping to the ground and then making the paneling so that they're lower in the frame than the other characters. So, like I said, and all of the shots of the diamonds are from a very like up angle because these are supposed to be the like prestigious of the prestige. They're fighters, they're diamonds, and that's why Foss really looks up to them. And so you see that even in this panels, like Foss is lower down, like I've been saying throughout the entire thing, except here. That's interesting. So Foss is still down there because Foss keeps dropping to the ground. So the only time Foss is above Bort's height is when Bort actually lifts Foss up there. But then, and I guess that's why it could be a visual representation of Bort helping Foss, like lifting them up. But then they decide not to help Foss in any way because of what I explained earlier, and they throw Foss back to the ground where they were. Uh, yeah, and then again, Foss's lower frame, all that. The Lunarians coming, and Kong goes asleep is not good. And you can see this was made more clear in the anime, but I don't think I got this when I was fast reading through it. But you can see the Lunarians encroaching behind him in the back. Uh, yeah, so that's chapter 3, and really it just shows Daya and Bort's relationship. and it really just shows when you're first reading it, you're like, oh, Bort's amazing, always looking out for Daya. And you know that Daya has a little bit of resentment against Bort and some envy, but you don't know that it'll explode how it does later in the story. So yeah, if any of you got anything else, like any other symbolism, like let me know. Like if there's something with Daya's arm or something. That's kind of all I have so far, but yeah. Um it's interesting. I also really like the way that the shadow is here. The artwork is amazing. We all know that. Um, and I love the like shape language with like Bort because even though like this isn't humanoid, you know it's Bort because of how it is. Anyway, let me know what you think of the two characters, and I'll see you in chapter, what is it, 4. Yep.